Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
So without further ado, let me talk to you a little bit about my guest who's joining me today. Marie Rose Fonley has more than 20 years experience in film and television production, Northern Exposure, Prefontaine, Aces High. She is the founder and president of Healing Planet Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation and presentation of ancient healing and spiritual traditions. Marie Rose has traveled extensively from the beaches of Hawaii to the heights of the Himalayas for her award-winning documentary film, Talking Story, of which she has written a companion book, and we're going to be talking about that today. She has transitioned her flourishing healing practice, working one-to-one with individuals, to focusing on the one-to-many, consulting with organizations, businesses, and other groups. She is currently the COO and creative director at High Impact Incorporated. Marie Rose was born in Vietnam, immigrated to France, and later to the United States, and she joins us live today from Hawaii. Good morning and aloha, Marie Rose. How are you today?
Aloha, Bernard. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, we're very, very pleased to have you join us today. I was saying it last week how I guess it was Kismet that you are coming on the week after we had a woman who did the ayahuasca experience and is, I guess, an expert, for lack of a better term, on the indigenous spiritual practices of the Shipibo. Oh,
yeah, the Shipibo people.
Shipibo, yeah. So
I know.
Here we go, and right, second week in a row, we get someone who's going to expand our horizons even further.
Yeah, it is really great synchronicity that Tracy Shaw, we worked with some of the people that I've met, and so that's really beautiful.
It's very cool. Anyway, so Marie Rose, tell us a little bit. Now, first of all, you started off by producing a documentary called Talking Story, and now you recently went on to create a companion book to go with the documentary. I'm very curious to hear, coming from, we're talking about corporate media, what inspired you to do such a huge project? What motivated you? What were the steps leading up to the creation of these projects and or where you are today?
Yeah, I know, as a young person who decided that she wanted to get into media, I understood the power of media at a young age. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to work for other people for a long time and learn how it is currently being done. But one day, I hope to be able to create what I call now media as medicine. I didn't have those words then. And so I always felt that just as you're doing, Bernard, how do we create media that has creates inspiration instead of desperation? So that's one of the kind of the seeds that was planted when I was young. And then in particular to this project, I kind of started thinking about it. The New Age movement was in full swing, and we all were introduced to some great concepts, philosophies, and practices. But I really wanted to touch into the roots of these traditions or these belief systems. And so I started doing research on indigenous healing practices, and like Tracy said in your show last week, realized, wow, they're actually in danger of disappearing. The plant medicine, the forests where the plants are growing are disappearing. The elders, who hold this knowledge are passing on without being able to pass forward their knowledge.
Yeah.
So then I felt, oh my gosh, I have to do something. And well, what can I do? And I'm not much of an activist per se, but I did know that I understood how to make film and how to write. So I thought, well, I'll offer that. And so that's how I kicked off my my journey with some hubris about changing the world. But instead, I realized I can share stories, and that's my bailiwick.
Oh, I love it. I love it. What a wonderful way to come to where you are today. And I can't help, and I'm very curious, and you don't have to share any names or anything, but as I was reading some of the information that you put, it seemed that you had been involved already in New Age mysticism or whatnot, and were a little, how shall we say, disenchanted with the teacher or teachings or something like that. And I know that happens to a lot of people. It happened to myself, actually, which is one of the reasons why I started doing what I'm doing. And
Yes.
I'm wondering, was it, well, you don't have to say who it is, but what was it that frustrated you? And perhaps, was it like, the mainstream, the law of attraction type stuff? What was the scenario there?
For me, I feel that, as you said, it is very common. So I'm glad I'm not the only one because when one is betrayed by a teacher or a guide, it can feel, the first thing you feel is, God, I don't know, how could I have been so stupid, But my disenchantment came from what I kind of call, and not the one who coined this phrase, but spiritual materialism. And, I mean, nobody is saying that you shouldn't have the life you want to live if it includes wonderful material things. I know I have many beautiful things in my experience and in my life, but I kind of had a suspicion that wasn't the point of being on a path of self-awareness and of transformation and of growth of consciousness. And so I think it's wonderful that people learn how to manifest, but they also need to, I think about what happens after you manifest all these things. Now you got to deal with them.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So, in fact, I worked with a lot of people who, they tried on all the things about manifestation and The Secret and all that, and it was great. So I don't mean to say these things weren't of service, but then their minds got a hold of it and they created all this that they had to unmanifest. So, the promise of the spiritual path in my experience is not that you're going to have a life that's free of suffering and free of fear and free of challenges. It's just that you'll be given some tools to move through them with more grace and more wisdom, or that you'll have the ability to gain wisdom from those things.
Yeah.
And kind of looping back to what you're saying, what kind of wisdom can we gain from this kind of violence that we're seeing right now, this kind of conflict that's really being exposed right now? And those are, of course, very personal questions and very personal answers, but it is the way for us to find the light in the dark. In the book I talk about, my mom raised us. She always said, what is bad is good. That was her way of just, when something is challenging or when something appears bad, what's the opportunity? So I think the spiritual path, or even just forget the spiritual path, how about the humanist path, how to be the best human possible, it has to do with, being willing to look at the opportunities to grow and learn.
Absolutely, and I just want to point out something that you kind of mentioned. I guess I'm going to look at the other aspect of it here for just a moment. Is while these techniques of manifestation and about materializing the beautiful things in our life, yes, of course. I mean, excuse me. I live a very humble life, but I like to have pretty things around me. I might buy them from a thrift store, but they're pretty, they're nice. We're allowed to have pretty things on a spiritual path, absolutely.
Of course.
On the other hand, we have people we need to temper that with we need to temper our spirituality also with the reality that humans need sustenance, humans need a roof, humans need to make a living. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with manifesting these things. It seems that in the disenchantment, and I've been disenchanted both ways. I think that's why I'm bringing this up. Is I've been disenchanted where yes, I've seen. I mean, a great example is that gentleman that was charging $10,000 for a weekend sweat lodge and killed all these people.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the other side of that, we have the idea that, oh, and I did this for many, many years, that because I'm spiritual, I have to live in poverty. You know,
Yeah.
and there's got to be that happy medium, that understanding. And I find that when we truly align with our higher consciousness or with the path of spirituality, removing the ego, we start to see that, okay, yes, I'm hungry. I need to eat. Oh, it's cold outside. I need a roof. You know, I'm naked. I need clothes. You know, these things don't become, uh, don't get caught up with that whole egotistical aspect of, well, then I'm not being spiritual. Is that making sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the ego is so clever. It's a fine actor. And so, that's our work. I don't think we're all in human form here, so very few of us are going to eradicate the ego, but to recognize when it jumps on the bandwagon of in other words, you want to know whose hands you're putting the magic wand into. And so, Spirit gives us these tools, and there are these different magic wands and empowerments. And so you want to make sure you don't give them to the children, like don't try this at home without adult supervision.
Right. I I like what and yes, I have specific qualms about Abraham Hicks and whatnot. All these cruises and whatnot. But hey, if you want to do a cruise and a seminar, that's great. But I do love what she says is that, well, what Abraham says through her is that you incarnated on this planet to be happy, not to be unhappy, not to be miserable, not to suffer, and that's a good way to look and kind of gauge your spiritual, I guess you call it like your spiritual compass.
Mm-hmm.
If you're unhappy, then perhaps you need to rebalance and rethink the direction that you're going in, and that includes over manifestation or under manifestation.
Right. That's right. That's right. And again, you can just look to nature. Most plants don't drink more water than they need,
Yeah.
right? So that's this very simple message. We kind of get all confused when our minds try to make a bigger deal of it than it is. And I think that, and again, even if the ego needs to go through the journey of manifesting certain things in order to know it can do it, and yet that's not the thing, that's okay too. But I often try to encourage people, just keep going. So now you have the Maserati and you've got all the diamonds and you have the designer shoes. What is that bringing you peace? Is that bringing you wisdom? And not everybody wants peace and wisdom. They'd rather have the shoes. That's fine too. So I don't mean to say
Right,
everyone should be on this bandwagon, but for those who are earnest in their desire to touch spirit, I only share what my teachers taught me, which is just keep going, because that shiny, glittery thing, it's an interesting, you take a pit stop on the side of the road and you say, "Woo, beautiful view. Now keep going,"
Yeah. Yeah, and that can also be said for the spiritual experience of that. A good example is like last week we were talking about the ayahuasca experience, where
Mm-hmm.
let's say you're doing a wonderful meditation or you're in this wonderful spiritual altered state that you want to keep reliving it, but no, that was that moment. It's like, oh, this is wonderful, but I must continue my path and my progress.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's some of the things that are important in terms of, the shiny thing, because it's not. I mean, you don't want to just sit in your living room always looking at the slides of your trip to Germany or Paris.
Yeah,
You did that one, okay, and now people have seen the 1,000 slides. Move on, keep going.
yeah, exactly. Now, we've been having such a nice conversation on this. I'm afraid to move on to the rest of the topics that we're going to talk about today.
Uh,
We've only got a few minutes left on this particular segment here, but I'm wondering if in like the next 5 minutes, if you can share with us a little bit about how you went about creating this journey that you're on, or that you went on, I should say, the
huh?
journey of creating the talking story. Well, let's start with this. What is talking story? What does that mean? Why did you choose that title?
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't live in Hawaii when I started, but I live here now. And when you come to Hawaii and people invite you over to visit, they say, "Come over, let's talk story." And so, and that's how I was invited to meet with the kumus, the teachers, or the kahunas, the priests and spiritual leaders here. And so, when they asked me to come over and talk story, I had my camera gear and my crew, and I was ready to just ask them questions, be very professional. And they said, no, 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 that's not how it works. In fact, one of our first teachers, Auntie Mahaelani, she said, get in the water. And she was in this hot pond. And it's where the ocean and the thermal pools meet here in Hawaii. And she said, we're going to talk in the hot pond if you want to talk to me. And so it's this idea of you're immersed in each other's worlds when you talk story and you share. So on my journey, I realized that when I'm meeting with these teachers, I have to be willing to talk story and take the time to listen and also be willing to share my story. And in essence, my work in trying to pass these traditions or these healing practices and energies forward, I am now talking story to your listeners, and I'm talking story to the viewers of the film, and I'm talking story with my readers.
Beautiful, beautifully said, and a beautiful concept. Absolutely. Um, with that being said, was your connection with the Kahunas your first, I guess, segment of your journey in creating this?
Yes, it was. And well, the first thing I did was like, oh, so speaking of manifestation, so I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but I actually had a dream board.
Right
So
on.
I put on my dream board. I want to learn about I want to follow the traditions back to the roots that are may still be accessible. And I didn't know if that was possible. So I just started putting images, words, and things up on a board. And of course, Hawaii being still, closer to home than the other exotic locations, I called there first. And then, was greeted with such aloha spirit. You hear about that, but such warmth and welcome. My first sponsor was a teacher who knew many of the healers and who had her own massage school. Her name is Nancy Kahalevai, and she invited me to come. Didn't know me, and invited my crew and I to come stay in her home
Oh,
and
wow.
start talking with these teachers. And so that's how I got started in Hawaii.
Oh, that's awesome. And tell me a bit, we all seem to have this, I guess, fantasy of what it's like in Hawaii. And there's two sides of Hawaii. There's the commercial tourist, overly priced aspect of Hawaii, and then we have the indigenous, and we forget that there are still indigenous there. Uh, what is there still a large amount of people that are practicing indigenous spirituality, or is that too fading away in Hawaii?
I would say it is fading away, but also in terms of the Hawaiian people, and again, I don't mean to speak for them, but in my experience and my interactions, the spirituality is not separate from the way they live their lives in terms of, honoring the land, the aina, having aloha spirit. These principles are basically part of the Hawaiian culture. And so you could call them spiritual, but in essence, they just feel like, yeah, aloha, don't, if you're going to throw a stink eye at your neighbor, expect it to come back. So you need to do ho'oponopono, just shift that, things like that. So in many ways, it's not so separate, you know?
It's a lifestyle more than a spiritual path. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, thank you. What you said. Yeah, even when I was building my house here, the people that were helping me to construct the home, they would, one of them was tended a garden, and he would bring fresh tomatoes and fruit. And then one time, one of the carpenters brought me chickens. And so there was, and of course I would then serve food and make sure they had water and sustenance. So it became a community project, as opposed to you work for me and I'm the boss and, there's the contractor. And so there was all that aloha spirit. And when there was conflict, there was a way to talk through it. And, so some people would call that, well, that's the Ho'oponopono process. But, people aren't saying, hey, let's do Ho'oponopono, or I'm bringing you aloha right now, Now, I do want to say there is a distinction between, regular interactions with people, and then there are the kumus, the teachers.
Okay, Marie Rose, we're going to go on a break. Hold that thought, and when we come back, we're going to continue that. I knew we were going to come up on a break. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you, everybody.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Marie Rose Fahnle about her projects, both the documentary and her new book called Talking Story. And we were just talking about the meaning of Talking Story. And Marie Rose, before we went on the break, you were differentiating a little bit for us the I guess it was the people versus the teachers. Can you bring that back into perspective?
I did want to say I was speaking about, living in Hawaii as a Big Island resident, and or kama'aina as they call us. But there are the kahunas. So there are the spiritual experts, if you want, that the kahuna is a way of saying an expert or a spiritual leader. And then there are the kumus, the teachers, and they for sure are practicing the indigenous traditions and are working very hard to teach others about that. And, there was a time when it was considered what they call kapu, or forbidden to share these things with people outside the culture. So we're in a very blessed time where the teachers now understand that now is the time to share and to try to teach others about the things that they've been doing for many decades, or through the family line, through many generations.
I see, and I'm very glad to hear that they are realizing that we need to preserve this. And your book talks about how you're trying to preserve ancient spiritual and healing traditions. When it comes to your friends in Hawaii, what were some of the things that you did to help preserve? Did you document it, or did you write about it?
Yes, I think early on I had, this whole I'm going to save the world kind of egoic mission, and we must stop this from happening, that kind of bravado that one has at first when we get all excited about ourselves and what we want to do. But as I went out in the world and talked to these teachers, many of them actually gave me the reality that, you're not going to be able to stop this from happening, from changing. And so what are you going to do about that? And I had to think, well, I can share the stories. I can capture the practices on video. And I can talk about it at every opportunity. And so, those are the things that I know, that I can do well. And so I said to the universe, spirit, to God, if I have a skill set that can be of service in this arena, then show me the way. And so that's like, I had experience in film and television already working for others. And so I was able to gather that experience and put it toward this project, these projects.
Wow, wonderful. And so you journeyed to Hawaii. I'm guessing that you fell in love with Hawaii, and that's why you moved there.
Correct. Well, many people, of course, it's not unique to me. Many people fall in love with the islands and the lifestyle, the beauty, the quietude. And of course I did. And but I didn't think, well, I'm going to live here one day. Actually, Papa K, one of the kahunas that I met through this project, he pulled me aside before I left and he said, you're going to be back here before you know it. And I said, okay, fine, I'll come back to Hawaii. And he said, and you're going to live here someday. And I thought, oh, isn't that's so sweet of you. Thank you. And then he grabbed my arm and he said, and it's going to be sooner than you think. And so, of course, it was because, my first thought was, I work in media and technology. What am I going to do over there? But because of technology, of course, I can do many things from here. And also, I can travel,
Right.
so I travel quite a bit.
And as far as some of the information and traditions and practices they shared with you, can you share with us a little bit? Were you able to perform ceremony with them, do ritual with them? What were some of the things you were able to participate in?
I was so blessed to have been invited to participate in and to witness. For example, Papa K did a sacred ceremony at the volcano. I live on the Big Island, and we have. I'm one of these crazy people who says, hey, I'm going to move to an island that has an active volcano. But we were able to witness him doing an offering to Madame Pele, who is the goddess of volcano. And in doing so, he was also asking her permission if we could do a healing practice on her land. So so very close to the active part of the volcano. And so he did that before we even tried to have him set that up. And once he did the ceremony, then we set up a table. And then he, along with a few of the other kumus here, teachers, demonstrated for us the practice of lomi lomi, which on the surface is a massage. But it's underneath that, it's a massage that's infused with what they call pule, or prayer. And so it's a very intentional, prayerful practice on the practitioner's part, and a large offering of heart and spirit, in addition to the physical medicine that you get from being lovingly massaged. I was also able to, I mentioned that Auntie Mahealani had invited us to jump into a hot pond. And again, that's a body of water that is heated by the geothermal energy of the volcano and then cooled by the ocean waves that comes in, and the two blend together. And in that pool, we were given a lesson on duality. How do we embrace the wholeness of duality? And so we're doing this in a wonderful, warm pool and being given teachings about how to see the dark and the light and not make one good or bad, but to have a sense of wholeness is to be able to look at both sides and to be able to be immersed in those two things. So Hawaii for me was a very spiritual experience that was very sensual. It involved many of the senses. And when you receive, now it's very popular, hot stone massage. Those things were part of the lomi lomi practice, where we heat up volcanic rocks and then the stones are placed on the patient's body to help with the healing.
Oh, how beautiful. And I'm so happy to hear where it comes from. We hear so much about, hot stone massage. It's become very, very trendy, but
Yeah.
it's like this had to come from somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if it comes from other cultures, but I know for sure it's been used here for a very long time. And we were also introduced to herbal medicine, or the practice of lau lapa'au. And again, many of these things were taught, within the family. If you have blood sugar problems, drink this noni juice. If you have mosquito bites, rub this on your skin. So before, they kind of took it for granted that, well, everybody knows this. And then some of the plants started becoming hard to find. So now there's a bit more of a concerted effort to plant healing plants and teach about them. So teach about the value of them and the use of them in healing.
Oh, very good. That's very important, because we are killing off so many species of plants around the world. and
Yes.
we don't realize how beautiful they are and what they can do for us. Absolutely. You
Mm-hmm.
now you're on the Big Island, you said?
I am.
We have a I just want to put a side note here and a plug, why not, for our friend Kathy Bilski, who is also a radio host here on Revolution Radio, and she has a crystal shop in Honoka?
Honoka'a?
Uh-huh. Honoka'a, yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, well, I'm gonna have to go look her up.
I'm gonna have to give you her information. You gotta go say hello and probably get her on her radio show too.
I'll
She
take a little
has
look
a
about.
what is it? It's amazing. She has a 1,000 pound crystal in her store.
Wow.
It's absolutely amazing. So that would be very cool to see live. I wish I was there to see it.
When I go, I'll make a video for you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now, tell us the next. I guess the next segment of your journey. Where did Spirit guide you to go next? Was it Peru or China? Or I know you went to several countries.
Yes, yes. The next gate that opened was Peru, and again, I did do my research and I did do my part, but many of these gates opened up in a very synchronistic manner, and so I just followed, and I must have been staring at my dream board so hard that somebody introduced me to a person who was looking for a director and a producer to help make videos about their project in the rainforest in Peru, and so I was able to multitask and work on my project and theirs at the same time. And so that was a thrill. It was a thrill in a heartful kind of way in terms of, wow, okay. It happened very quickly, Bernard. I put the pictures on my board and I thought, someday I'm going to do this. And I would say within 2 or 3 months, I was on the road.
Wow. That's amazing. And what were the people you were able to interact with in Peru? And again, some of the traditions that you were able to see.
Yeah, when I went to Peru, I was able to meet with some shamans. One of them in particular, Don Pablo Amaringo, he called himself a retired shaman, which I thought was interesting. And I write in the book, he was in his pressed dockers and khaki pants and a khaki shirt, and he was, not what I had expected in my fantasy about meeting a shaman, but the wisdom was definitely there. And his idea was, I'm not working with people one-on-one anymore. I'm retired, and I'm now teaching people how to paint, children particularly, how to paint the rainforest. And so, I finally realized what he was doing was he was preserving the rainforest that he was seeing disappearing before him, and doing it through the arts. And in doing so, he was giving the children a chance to also make a living, since their livelihoods were going to be affected by the destruction of the rainforest or their sustenance, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, teaching them something about the lore of the spirits of the plants, as well as the actual medicinal value of them. So it was a very integrative education that kids were getting, even though it looked like it was just an art class. And so it didn't take long for me to realize, he's not retired at all. He has switched his healing and his practice to something greater, which is to try to give it to a younger generation without their having to become shamans themselves.
Oh, wow. That's pretty awesome. And as far as what region were you in Peru?
I landed in Pucallpa, which is the northeast, the east region first, and was there, and then we went upstream to a tributary of the Amazon, and then later on I went up more to Iquitos, which is more north. But then I also did, as Tracy was talking about in your show last week, is I did participate in the plant medicine, the ayahuasca ceremony, sacred ceremony, and like her, I was never a party person, and I'm so sensitive and lightweight. I'm Asian, we can't handle our liquor, and or I can't anyway. So
Right.
it was never much of a substance person. And there was a part of me that I realized had a prejudice that I thought it was kind of cheating, like well, you should be sitting on a pillow in lotus position instead of taking this drug. But then when I met with the shamans that work with ayahuasca, and they explained it to me more, that it is about listening to the wisdom of the plant spirits, and that it's actually the plant spirits that speak to them and tell them how to administer for medicinal purpose. And so there was this whole depth that, of course, prejudices are based on assumptions and lack of knowledge. So when I gained more knowledge and then I was invited to participate, I really felt that I needed to honor that. And then I could know I always say know what you're saying no to. So I need to know what I'm saying no to. And I did participate in the sacred ceremony, and it was very powerful. Unlike Tracy, I'm not strong enough to do it all the time. I did it. I've done it twice, and that was plenty.
Wow. And it does. I would think it does change your perspective of the world, even for a short period of time afterward. With the, I like to say we get like spiritual downloads when we're in that state of consciousness.
Yes, and also, clearly I'm a traveler, and in a sense, it's like taking a flight to a new place, and so you visit those worlds, and you should behave like a respectful visitor. And so for me, visiting the realms that the sacred vine opened for me, gave me many gifts if I was respectful and mindful, and also open to seeing what this world was about for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't help but, I guess my question to you is now that that particular ceremony is, of course, it's illegal in the United States, but then
That's
again,
right.
almost everything is here. But it is a spiritual tradition. It's one of the spiritual traditions that you feel deserves preserving?
Yes. I mean, again, preservation is such a tough word, because sometimes when we think preservation, we think of, we capture it and then we kind of keep it as it is. And that's, in a way, that's not of service either. I don't want things to be stored in a jar or as a butterfly might be in a little, oh, look at the exotic other and look what they used to do, but in terms of passing the transmissions forward, yes, it's very important medicine. And as you discussed, I don't want to be too redundant, but it's not a joyride. It's definitely not a pleasant experience in terms of it's not a high.
Right.
It's a diving deep, right? And so many people have asked me about it. It's not a recreational drug. I mean, of course, many people can do what they want with it. That's not my point. My point is be careful, because, she's very powerful. It's a very powerful tool. And if intention is set, you will receive a lot from it. And it needs to be administered in the hands of an expert, and so that's where you want to be able to have a shaman that is there to tether your spirit as it travels out in these new realms.
Yeah, yeah. To speak of another tradition, and I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe you saw it along your journeys, the kava kava, where they drink it. They drink a big bowl of it, and right now in South Florida, in Miami, and in Fort Lauderdale, they have kava kava bars. And it's basically, a very, upscale nightclub environment. And you bring 4 or 5 of your friends, and the waiter brings you this big bowl of kava kava, and you basically just get really annihilated and just sit there for a couple hours. And I kind of laugh. I mean, I'm very curious to see what the experience is like in a nightclub environment like that, but again, it's not the same. It's not the intention that the medicine was being created. And, I'm very surprised that it's legal here in the United States to do that. But I'm wondering, do you have any information on the kava kava experience? Did you study it like that?
Yeah, actually, here in Hawaii, it's called awa, AWA.
Uh-huh.
So, kava kava in Polynesian culture, in the I think in Australia and New Zealand, but here it's awa, AWA. And so, yeah, we have a couple awa bars. Now, I'll tell you my experience with awa, which is that one of the kahunas gave it to me for relaxation because I say in my book I'm I'm a recovering type AAA Asian American immigrant. So
Nice.
that means intense and very driven, right? And I guess they saw that in me and they said, let me give you something, a little something for that. And the awa was to help me sleep and to relax and to dream, so that I could get my psyche back into equilibrium. So the positive of that is then, of course, this medicine becomes more widely accessible.
Hmm.
The downfall is that you don't have an elder or an expert to help you administer. And so you actually can OD on AVA, not in terms of, I don't want to go into the medical aspect of it,
Right,
but
right.
one can overdose. And the AVA that the kahuna gave me was so powerful that all I needed was an eighth of a teaspoon of this powder, and it would put me into almost a coma for 12 hours.
Oh, wow.
I slept. And so that's why I always thought I can't do an Ava bar because I wouldn't even be able to drive home. I would just be asleep at the wheel, And that's the only thing But we have that kind of assimilation of things of different cultures, and that's part of how we learn about each other. So as you say, it's something that might be maybe appear not to be as respectful. At least, someone might be triggered to ask, what is kava kava? Where does it come from?
Exactly.
Maybe not, but it has a funny name. So I'm always for anything that causes people to want to maybe ask one or two questions about a different culture than their own. And so that's what I'm looking at. But yeah, awa is it's a very calming thing. But the other thing is, for me, it doesn't taste very good. It's very chalky, and it kind of makes your tongue feel funny. Again, it's not a pleasant experience per se.
Yeah. Yes, I've been told it's very, very bitter.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. But people put things in it, so they'll flavor it with
Yeah.
honey or whatever it is. But the only thing I'm concerned about too is that even when we are at a bar or a regular bar drinking liquor, we have enough warnings of, don't drink too much or don't drink and drive. But nobody says don't kava kava and drive, or you might not wake up for your meeting tomorrow morning, or 2 days might go by, or Rip Van Winkle, So
Right, right, right. Very interesting. I wonder if they have a designated kava driver now.
well, when that happens, we'll know that our cultures have definitely become more blended. So
Absolutely. Well, we're having a break. We'll be back in just a few minutes, and we're
uh,
going to continue our discussion with Marie Rose Fonley. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. For those of you that are interested in following up on some of the work that I've been doing, as well as some archives of the radio show, this show is brought to you by Revolution Radio, of course, but it is produced by the Global Illumination Council. And you can find great blogs, you can find great videos, you can even become a member to support the awakening of humanity at thegic.org. We just launched our new GIC 4.0 responsive platform. It'll work on your tablet, it'll work on your iPhone, and we are looking for volunteers, people to participate. There's just so much to do there. We have documentaries, we've got programs, we have issues and campaigns that you can all be a part of. Again, you can visit us at thegic.org. We are out in beta, so there might be a bug or two, but we're working on that, and we should have the the final finished product sometime early next year, but it is available now, and it's working pretty good, I must say. Anyway, again, why don't you come and visit me at thegic.org and see what's behind the show, the Just Bernard Show, and everything else that we are doing to empower the human experience. Back to our wonderful guest that's joining us today, Marie Rose Fon Lay. Marie Rose, tell us the website where people can get more information about your work and the book.
Oh, yes, they could go to talkingstorybook.com and find our social media links there, our events page for everything that's coming up in terms of what we're doing, talking to people like you and your listeners, and also the book tour that's happening in spring.
Oh, fun. And is the documentary itself available online as well?
It is available online as well. And again, on our website, it will give you the options of where you can purchase the book and the DVD. It can be at your local bookstore. It can be online. So whatever your audience wants to choose. Many people like to support their independent bookstores. And so I'm very, very pleased and honored that my book is being published by North Atlantic Books, and then also being carried in various bookstores.
Right on. That's great. Wonderful. Now, your journey, you went from Peru, and I'm assuming your next trip was over toward Asia.
Yes. We started heading.
How was that for you? Were you, first of all, were you born in Vietnam?
I was born in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And thanks to my very resourceful mother, we were able to get to France. And then after that, after living in France for a few years, we came to America.
Wow. So it must have been very interesting and, I would think heartening to go and see Asia, especially from this perspective, I would think.
Yeah, it definitely, going back to Vietnam was one of the places that I went. And of course, it was bittersweet. And so it was good to have a project to focus on, to be able to kind of process that return, all the emotions that come up with returning home. It was the first time that I went home after leaving. So it was a very powerful experience in terms of my personal experience. And then being able to blend that with the work that I was doing in the world was a really wonderful gift to have.
And we don't hear much about the indigenous spirituality or the shamans of Vietnam. Can you tell us a little bit of what, beyond what we see on National Geographic? What's the reality of it like on the ground as far as the indigenous spirituality?
Well, unfortunately, when I went to Vietnam, I had planned to do that, but we were hit with a typhoon, and so we were flooded out, and so I was able to kind of address the folk medicine that many of us grew up with, but that it also has its roots in traditional Chinese medicine. So we have the cupping, which some of your listeners I'm sure know about, where glass cups are heated and then placed on the back. And the heat sucks the skin up into the cup. And then, the idea of that in very basic terms is that it's pulling out the bad qi or the stagnant qi, and also increasing blood flow, to the various organ meridians, to deal with illness. And then, we were able to also demonstrate in English, we could call it coin scratch treatment, where you actually use a silver coin and some medicinal oil on the back and you scrape it. And my mom used to do this to us when we were growing up. And imagine what that feels like, getting your back scraped with a metal object with a menthol type oil, and being told it's good for you. But the good news is it always felt good afterward. I don't know if it was because they stopped or just because it was working. And then we were able to, there's a place in Hanoi in the north of Vietnam where there's a place called Medicine Street. And all along that street, all the herbal medicines are made and sold and traded there. And so that was wonderful too, to see how active herbal medicine was still happening in Vietnam. So the thing that I missed was being able to go up into the mountains and meet with the mountain women healers who work with herbs and who were very instrumental during the war to treat people, because of course medical treatment wasn't at all readily available to everybody, particularly the villagers, and roots were cut off. And during the war, they were very instrumental in saving lives and helping wounds heal. And so that was one of my regrets. So it's still on my list
Oh, wonderful.
to go back and climb up those mountains.
Very good. I would be very interested to know about the mountain women. Absolutely. What I find very fascinating, though, is in I guess Asian medicine, and I know we call it Chinese medicine, but it's beyond China. I'm guessing.
Yes, I mean, so that's why when I refer to traditional Chinese medicine, that's uh, a specific discipline and a specific type of category of
Ah,
medicine. But Tibetan medicine doctors have their own practice that is thousands of years old that also blends traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and then Tibetan medicine. And there are then also the spiritual practices that are intended to be medicinal in terms of their trance media. There are people who do trance channeling as a
mhm.
form of healing. So yeah, Asian medicine is varied. But the one that's most well known and most studied, I would say, is traditional Chinese medicine,
Yeah,
TCM.
yeah.
Hmm.
Very interesting. And what I love is how, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, is it seems that it's not as endangered as the Western America's indigenous practices are. I'm hoping. I don't know if I'm correct in that, but is it fair to say that we have more schools, we have more practice, especially with Western culture trying to add or supplement our own spirituality with the Asian medicine and practices? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate, Bernard, in terms of um, i- it's been around for thousands of years, but there was interaction between Eastern and Western culture in terms of traditional Chinese medicine. The one thing that is happening, however, is the concern because in addition to acupuncture and other practices, the herbal medicine is also very important in traditional Chinese
Hmm,
medicine.
hmm.
And so one of the issues is that some of the herbs may be getting more and more difficult to find. This for sure is happening in Tibetan medicine that is similar because they're being over harvested. And then there's also the issue is how clean are the herbs now coming if they are coming out of China. People are concerned about environmental toxicity having gotten into the medicine. So there are I know some doctors of Oriental medicine who no longer prescribe their herbs if they're from China because they can't guarantee the quality of them.
Hmm. Oh,
So
that's scary.
yeah, it's just an interesting. I mean, there are companies in the United States now that have cultivated the herbs here and are growing them organically and those kind of things. So I guess I'm just saying that. So when people are prescribed Chinese herbs, that they are mindful of that.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
is it a clean source?
Yeah, I saw. I don't know if it was a TV show or a documentary or something where one of the distributors was lacing one of the herbs with cocaine, and people were wondering why, they were getting so hyper or whatever. I was
What?
like, oh my God.
That doesn't even make sense financially. That
I
doesn't
know.
cost them so much money to do
It
that.
was probably a TV show. I don't know. Maybe a documentary, and they were looking for the aha. But
Goodness, that doesn't sound good, like a
you know
good
what?
idea at all.
Marie Rose, I have a question for you because as a Westerner, I am a Reiki master and practitioner, and I'm wondering in the East, what is Reiki to them? Is it prana healing? Is it energy healing? What is there even such thing as Reiki in Japan and China? And we hear that it was discovered by this man and he brought it to Hawaii, blah blah blah. But
Hmm.
what is their form of it? And what do they call it? And is it still being practiced? Do you know?
I myself am not learned in the Reiki tradition, and of course, I honor and I know many people who are, but I myself am not familiar with it, and I did not run into it. However, energy medicine is, of course, not. You're correct. It's very common in the different healing arts that I was exposed
Oh,
to, and
yeah.
so. it's the idea, of course, is life force energy
Yeah.
runs through us and around us. And sometimes when people say, well, how does, putting a needle, in my arm help my digestion? And the only way I know how to explain it is that you have to think of, energy meridians running through your body like rivers. And so if you have a blockage downstream, it's going to affect the headwaters. And so, you put a needle in there to stimulate movement. And that's me explaining acupuncture in my very layman terms, not having been trained or anything, but it's the only way that I can kind of try to explain that. And then in terms of energy medicine, one of the basic things people say, well, it is energy, or what if I don't, that's just too weird. And then I think, well, wait a minute, you turn on your light switch every day, and I mean, do you have to trace it back to the power plant? And so you don't believe in electricity because you can't understand how it works? Or are you just glad you can turn this? Yeah. Or are you just glad you can flip the switch and light comes on, and you assume somebody knows how to do this, and I'm so grateful. So, I always tell people you don't really have to understand the nuts and bolts of it to benefit from it. Having respect for it is always a good thing or a helpful thing. But energy medicine is very much about life force energy, how it moves through our bodies, how it moves in our surroundings, our environment, and the people next to us. So, and I believe at NIH, National Institutes of Health, they now include the option for patients to receive acupuncture and or Reiki when they are being treated there, which is such a great indication that we are awakening to expanding our collective medicine cabinet, which is basically what I'm trying to do with my project. Is really just say, you don't have to go native, if you will. You don't have to wear feathers and do all this stuff, but don't you want to have as many options as possible in your medicine cabinet? And so if you do, you may want to be interested in these things that are starting to be eliminated,
Yeah, we don't want to lose the wisdom behind it and such.
Exactly. So my friend Don Pablo Amaringo that I met in the rainforest, who's now no longer with us in physical form, he used to say cutting down a tree is like burning a book before it's been read. And
wow, that's very profound.
Yes. And so, in other words, before you cut that tree down, don't you want to know what it has to say to us, what it has to teach us? So I think about that quite often in terms of what is my work.
And as you said, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And what comes to mind, I have to say, and I know this is probably a little silly, but what was that movie with Sean Connery? Was it Medicine Man, perhaps?
Yes.
They cut down the tree with the only herb to cure cancer or something.
Right. Well, that's definitely happening. I mean,
absolutely.
In just even if we were just not thinking in our altruistic mind and we were just being very narcissistic, well, don't you want to have access to the best medicine when you get sick? And so I'm not saying this medicine is better than what we have. What I'm saying is it's another medicine that we could have,
and I've spoken about this before, and I don't think I'm changing the subject too much. I hope I'm not. But in Ecuador, I'm dealing with an elderly cat, and she's got cancer. Mm-hmm. And she's had three tumors, and I came in contact with this gentleman in Ecuador who said that he can cure cancer. And they sent me the stuff called Amazon Black Salve. I want you to know that within 2 months, 2 of the tumors have fallen off, and we're working internally because she still had some cancer underneath the surface that didn't come to the skin. And I'm working internally with a tonic. And now the cancer is literally coming to the surface, turning into a black scab, and falling off.
Wow.
It's amazing what's happening. And again, this is medicine from Ecuador. I'm assuming this is indigenous. I believe it has bloodroot and several other
I was gonna say, I can't wait. I would love to look at that jar.
and they openly give the ingredients. They're like, it's got bloodroot. I think it's got DMSR in it for the skin to try to get it through. But I would love to get this gentleman on the show, and I need to get him as soon as my cat is all cured so I can thank him. But
Yes.
things like that we're not aware of is again due to the wisdom and the tradition of the indigenous cultures that we're so sadly misaligning ourselves from.
Yes, and I often remind people because I am a person of color, and people say, "Well, you people, you have access to your traditions," and I say, "What people? There was a war in my country. I don't have. I'm not as you're not as far removed as you think, and I'm not as close as you think. So, it was only a couple generations ago that doctors in America were going around with their little medicine bag with dandelion root tea and herbs to treat
Yeah,
their patients,
yeah.
and so people forget because we've been blessed with pharmaceuticals. I'm not going to be down on pharmaceuticals. I mean, I've been healed by them when
Oh,
it was
absolutely.
necessary, right? And as I mentioned in my book and my documentary, my mother was a registered nurse and my brother is a physician. So my whole point is it doesn't have to be this kind of apparent duality or mutually exclusive thinking because and in fact that's what I'm trying to combat because I see that many people feel like they have to choose one or the
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
So I mean you're still gonna give your cat the shots they need for living here and you're still going to do the things that the vet would give them, but hey, the vet doesn't have this black tonic salve stuff,
Right,
so
right.
yay, you have another option. And so I'm trying to appeal to because people in modern culture love options. We like our choices, or we say we do, and then here we are eliminating them by killing plants and letting elders die without collecting their knowledge. And so all I'm saying is, are you aware this is happening? I don't want people to feel guilty or ashamed or anything, but just are you aware? Are you aware? And do you care? And if you do, then this.
Absolutely, and that's a great perspective to have. We really have to incorporate both. Well, I would like to think both brain hemispheres in our thinking, intuitive
Hmm.
and logical. And sometimes
Yes.
the intuitive medicine is going to do just as well, if not better, than the logical medicine. Absolutely. Marie
Hmm.
Rose, tell us a little bit about Nepal. What is the indigenous culture there? What are they called? Shamans? What are they? I know the term shaman actually comes from Siberia, if I'm not
That's right.
mistaken.
That's right. Well, there to answer your question directly, in the area where I visit, which is in the northwestern corner, and that's the area that I visited. So there, they're called Dhamis, Dhami, a Dhami, and in essence, we say shaman just to kind of help to cheat and kind of explain what they do. But I think if we were more technical, a shaman is usually someone who actually travels the realm. So they travel the realm to go gather information. They come back with it. And this is how it was explained to me. Whereas someone who is a trance channel brings the energy in them. Does that even make sense? What I'm saying? So
Very much.
one is a journeying outward of the body to go gather something, and the dummies in Nepal are trance channelers and a trance medium, and so they actually bring an energy into their body. And so that was what I was witness to in a certain area called Humla in the northwest region of Nepal.
And the northwest region of Nepal, is that mountainous? Is that in the Himalayas?
Yes, it's in the Himalayas, and there it was an old trade route in between Nepal, Tibet, and India. So in the old days, it was actually quite a hopping place. But then with the changes in Tibet and the way that the Chinese government has
Hmm.
managed that, that route has been closed. So we still have access into Tibet from that corner of the world. So there is an influence of the Tibetan culture there as well. And so it's a remote area in the Himalayas that we flew there. You take off from Kathmandu and you head west to another place called Nepalganj, and then you hop over to Humla. And you land on a very, very tiny, tiny landing strip.
I can only
So
imagine.
yeah, I thought, what is that? Oh, I thought, what is that little thing? Oh, that's where we're landing. Oh my God. So I stopped looking.
At least it wasn't
Um,
on a cliff, right?
it actually was.
Oh, Lord.
It's on the edge of a cliff.
Lovely.
Well, so then that's what's so funny is that in this, for me, I'm not the kind of REI outdoorsy girl, and but I had to be willing to traipse through the rainforest and trek through the Himalayas in order to have this experience of investigating the inner landscape. And so I think it's funny because some people make the assumption that I'm kind of adventure girl, and I did not like having dirt under my fingernails when I was on the road. Let's just put it
You're
that
not
way.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I was willing to be, but yeah, it's it's not my nature.
Absolutely, I hear you on that one. I can relate. I can relate. Now, the people in Nepal, their practices, their traditions, is it the same thing with as in Hawaii? Is the lifestyle incorporated into the spirituality, and therefore the healing practices are a part of the lifestyle?
It is, except there for sure, because the villages are smaller in the Humla area. The Dami is in charge of mediation. He's in charge of the wellness of the entire community. He's in charge of making sure that they have good growing season. So he has a really big responsibility in addition to having to farm his own land and raise his own family. So it's not a glamour position there at all. And most of the Adami is it's interesting. So there's a Dami who's the main healer, the main trance medium, and then there's the helper who's called the Dangri. So the Dami is actually, they say, chosen by the spirit. So chosen by the deity that will be channeling them. But the Dangri is actually a father to son tradition that's handed down from generation to generation. The Dangri's job is to translate the Dami's messages because the Dami speaks in an archaic language and sometimes speaks poetically or in metaphors. And so then the Dangri has to then translate the messages coming through the Dami to the villagers.
Wow. That's really fascinating. I like that.
Yeah, it's complex, but it's a true partnership. And when I asked them, well, how do you team up, the Dami and the Dangri? Because they're in it together, And they talk about a selection ceremony where the Damis come out, and then the established Damis are there, and then the potential Dangris are there, and they have a ceremony, and the Dami will then channel the deity, and through that process, choose the Dangri by jumping on their back. And of course, that's symbolic of what happens when a deity comes through your body, is that it's actually jumping on your back and using you as a vehicle for spirit.
That's very interesting. And I say that as someone who grew up in Miami around Santeria. They call it the spirit riding you.
Oh, yeah.
When they do the channeling, they mount you, or I forgot what the word is, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
The metaphor is the same.
Yes.
And that's thousands of miles away from each other.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Very interesting. Very interesting. And as far as like any ceremonies that you were able to see, were you able to participate in any of their work there, or was it more information gathering?
I went there this is funny, Bernard, because all these trips that I went on were supposed to be what we call location scouts, which is you go there first to even see if there's a story. And then we landed and, there's a story, and here it is. So we landed and we're explaining our mission and hoping just to look around. And then very quickly somebody got sick and the Dami was called. And so we were invited into someone's home, which is a very private thing. And I felt very, just so honored that the Dami and the family members would allow strangers of a different culture with weird machines to stare at them, to listen to them talk about their illnesses, and to listen to the prescription and to observe the ceremony. So it was no small thing. And, that's one thing as a documentary filmmaker that I'm always aware of, that you're a guest. And just because you have a camera, it doesn't give you the rights to not be a good guest. But anyway, so understanding that we were being invited as guests to a very sacred, and usually, that's like having a camera crew come into your doctor's office with you, and you're telling them about your very private aches and pains.
Right.
But now, or during a house call, right? And so, that first night we thought, okay, this will be interesting. And then bam, the spirit, the deity went into the dummy's body, and it was powerful, very physical, very violent in a sense. He was shaking very, very violently. Then it was in the middle of the night, and I, of course, was sleepy after trekking for hours and hours, but I woke up.
I bet.
It was a very incredible experience. And so we were able to capture that on camera, with yak butter lamps and 140-watt battery powered light bulb.
Wow.
So that was our first experience of a Dami channeling a deity and doing healing work on a woman who was complaining of stomach issues and pains that she had been experiencing for several weeks, and that she had tried Western medicine that was given at the first aid post, but she said it wasn't helping her. And so the Dami channeled the deity and said some prayers. He took a hot ladle and put some sacred yak butter on it and put his foot on it, because it's said that when they're in trance, they can't feel pain. Put his foot on the hot ladle and then placed his warm foot on her chest. And all the while the Dongri was chanting mantras. And then afterward, so the Dami is doing a healing session, but then because the deity only comes in every once in a while, then people are allowed to ask questions. So then you have a kind of divination.
Ah, interesting. Well, we're gonna have to follow up with divination after this break. We'll be right back after this message.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Marie Rose Fonley on her new project, the Talking Story, her book, which is a companion to the documentary, the award-winning documentary. And before we went on the break, Marie Rose was sharing a very intimate moment with one of the people that she was able to have participate in her documentary. And if I recall correctly, you were telling us that the quote-unquote shaman, the Dami, had finished his healing, and that this was the time that the villagers used for divination?
Yeah, the family members, the idea is you kind of take advantage of the deity when it's there, when they're there. And so then the rest of the family started asking questions. And one of the questions that came up was that apparently some of their goats had been stolen. And so they asked the deity who did it. And so the deity asked, because sometimes spirits don't really interact in material things, but so they asked, what are the choices? Who are the suspects? And then they chose one. So I thought that was an interesting use of the deity.
Right.
And there are some other things. So that's where we talk about the shaman or the Dami has to be. Every shaman or Dami or healer tends to be, the lawyer, the judge, the healer, the mediator, the doctor. There are all these roles that in our society are spread out, whereas within a villager, that the healer, the spiritual teacher, is all those things. And so in this case, he was the doctor to the woman who was sick, and then he had to be kind of the, so in addition to saying who stole the sheep or the goat, he had to say, well, don't go over there and clobber him. You might just want to do this.
Right.
So there's a guidance about social behavior in how you handle that kind of situation. So that all that was so very unexpected and wonderful to witness. And then afterward, you would think, okay, we've already overstepped our welcome, but then there's a celebration after the session, and there's a sharing of yak butter tea and some snacks afterward. So yak butter tea was something that I was very much, it sounds weird, but I was very much looking forward to experiencing. I don't know why. It just sounded like, if I'm going to be in the Himalayas, I want yak butter tea.
Right.
And I got my wish, and yak butter tea, that's something that you kind of want to think of as soup. Because if you think of it as tea, it's a savory tea that's made with black tea and yak butter.
And yak butter being the milk from the yak?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. I'm like, okay, what is yak butter? They churn the yak meat? I don't know.
Good question. And interestingly, yak butter is very sacred because, as you know, many of the things that are hard to come by or are precious resources are considered sacred gifts from the gods. So yak butter is used in ceremony. It's used in the lamps. So how many of these homes were lit at night was with the use of yak butter lamps, but now mostly used for ceremony. And so the yak butter is used as the emollient that causes the flame to continue. But also, in sacred ceremony, the yak butter will be rubbed onto people. And that is one of the things that happened to me, when I was being treated there, that I was slathered with yak butter.
Now, is that a part of the medical treatment, or is that like a spiritual anointing, or a combination?
Actually, it's the latter. It's a spiritual anointing.
Okay.
So yeah, apparently I needed a lot of it. And just a funny story that I wrote about in the book, at the end of that leg of our journey, we came back to a guest house, which is, just lodging, still in Humla, still in the Himalayas. And, they had an outdoor shower that with one of those solar bags, where the water's heated. And we all thought we were in the Four Seasons. We're just like, oh my God, luxury accommodations. There's a hot shower. And so we were going to draw straws. Who's going to be the first one to take a hot shower? Because the solar sack will take hours to heat up again.
Yeah.
And there was no argument. Everybody said, it's you because you smell like rancid yak butter.
Oh, no.
As I said, I am usually a princess, so this kind of outdoorsy shenanigans was a challenge for me. I had no idea that I was smelling badly, but apparently after 24 hours trekking, yak butter on the body is on outdoor gear is not a pleasant smell for your companions. Yeah. Note to everybody, if you're going to do that, be the first to shower.
Carry your solar heater with you.
Yeah.
Now, divination, I'm very fascinated because we don't get to hear much about divination in indigenous cultures. Did you find that divination was something that was spread out throughout the spiritual people that you came in contact with?
Yeah, that's interesting. And mostly in Asia. So there's a divination tradition in Tibetan Buddhist practices called throwing a mole. The Dhamis in Nepal do divination. And in my book, I talk about my great-grandfather who was a blind man, but he was a seer. So he was able to divine one's past and one's future. So divination is something that is actually also when we were in Southwest China and I met with a Nashi, a Dongba is what they call their shamans or their priests in the Nashi culture. He also did a divination for me, and so I was divined quite a bit. But it's the art of divination. Of course, we say it's a slippery art because the seer can only see your potential futures based on current circumstances. Yeah. And so I'm talking about the belief system behind divination, because we have freedom of will, depending on what choices we make after the reading, then of course the reading may or may not be accurate. So, the kind of disclaimer, if people are looking into divination and tell me my future, understand that if you, change your intention or circumstances within your psyche or your awareness, then the divination may not be as accurate. However, most people who do divination will first tell you about your past just to give you a sense of validation or confirmation that they see you, that they see your field. So, so yeah, I actually had divination in Southwest China, and witnessed it in Nepal. It's there in the Tibetan traditions as well.
I find that very interesting that they do the same thing in Eastern and or indigenous cultures. Is that here in the West we call it. I do readings as well, and we call it intuitive counseling.
That's good.
But it's the same thing,
Yes.
and that's exactly what I do. I'll tell people, I'll give them a little feeling of what I see with them at the present moment. But I'll also say to them, this is where, if things keep going the way they are, this is where you're headed.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not like, I always say, beware the fortune teller because nothing is absolute.
Yes. Beautiful. Yes. Yes. That's really beautiful. So I mean, I kind of when I try to, if people ask me about it, I'll say for me there are three levels of divination or intuitive reading, and there's potentiality, which tends to be a little bit less formed, and then there's possibility, which comes a little bit closer to materializing, and then there's probability. So sometimes you can get a sense of those, and in my mind, it's one is closer to this round. They get closer and closer. So potentiality is out there, possibility is a little bit closer, and probability is right next to me.
Yeah. And it is. It's very funny because as someone who is an intuitive counselor, I'm puzzled by people's like, oh well, that's all hoity-toity, fluffy, new age stuff, and I'm like, it's really just common sense. It's like if 2 plus 2 equals 4, and 4 times 2 equals 8, then this is going to be the answer to that equation. And that's all we're really doing is
Right.
generating a process of understanding the equation of life,
Right. I
Every
love that you
action
say
has a
that.
reaction.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a certain type of mathematics. And I do talk to people about, in my experience, healing or spiritual traditions have two sides. There's the very practical, mechanical science to it, which people say, what? And then there's the mystical part that I actually can't explain,
Right, right.
So and many people say that about medicine. Doctors will say, I know that when I do this procedure, it's going to have this outcome. I can't explain the life force that causes something to heal. They can't actually explain what it is that puts life into a new, into a baby as it comes into being. They know that it comes into being and then it grows to this many months and it has this, it multiplies in cells and blah, blah, blah. So there's the mystery and there's the science. And like you said, I mean, I think that people sometimes it's a way of invalidating these kind of practices when you say, well, it's actually kind of practical too. I mean, if you say, keep having bad relationships, it might be a good time to ask, what are the common denominators here?
Exactly.
A little self-awareness and soul searching is appropriate.
Absolutely, and for sure with that. Now, Marie Rose, tell us a little bit, or tell me, what was one of the scariest experiences you had? Were there any risks besides landing on the side of a cliff? I mean, we always hear about going into the jungles. We always hear about going into quote unquote third world countries and whatnot,
Yeah.
non-westernized cultures and whatnot. Was there any risk? Were you in any war torn areas? Was there, risk of, robbery? What was some of the risks that might have been involved in all of these travels?
Well, of course I was born in a developing country, so some of those things aren't as scary to me in terms of, well, when you're in an area, as you are when you're in the West, when you're in an area where people don't have as much, you need to be a little bit more aware because they're going to need or want some of the things you have. So that's the typical kind of be aware as a traveler when you're in unfriendly areas. But in terms of, I never felt threatened in any way in any of the places that we visit, even though we did have some things in our bags were stolen or, there were areas that were not as safe as others. However, the scariest thing for me was something that happened to me spiritually in Nepal. And that's something I write about in the book, and it's in the film, that at first I personally did not want to be made public at all. And then here I am talking about it, and I'm talking about it because I found out that many people have had similar experiences and were scared and did not have a context in which to understand what was happening. And in the film, in the Himalayas, and in the book, I talk about the experience of having had a spirit come into my body, and what that felt like and how scary it was. And at the time, on the surface, people thought maybe she's just having altitude sickness, which, again, that could be what happened. You have a lot less oxygen going to your brain. And sometimes people have seizures and things like that. And so, I had physical seizures. I was apparently speaking in tongues. And, the only reason I have memory of what happened is because I have footage, that my crew was smart enough. They kept the cameras rolling. So it wasn't a setup or anything at all.
Right.
It was there saying, whoa, this is kind of amazing. We're going to keep the cameras rolling. But they were only able to do that when some of my crew said, we've got MR, we've got Marie Rose, we'll take care of her. You guys keep rolling. So they kind of made a decision on their own to do that. And so for me, it was an experience of a very uncomfortable, scary experience, and of losing control of my body, and feeling like I was in a way drunk. And I told you I'm not a substance person, but so drunk or so high that I can't move my body, and something's coming out of my mouth and I can't control it, and so there was that kind of experience, and so it was pretty. It was very intense. And even to this day, when I've been in screenings, and it comes on, I am very, very uncomfortable with it. And ironically, I thought the audience would be, but they're way over it, doesn't bother them as much as it bothers me. So that's also been an interesting learning for me in terms of my own ego and self-consciousness. So I've had to, seek counsel. What happened to me there? And I've, talked to teachers, and some of them have seen the footage. And kind of the end consensus, this is post-journey, is that it wasn't just a possession, so I wasn't just possessed by a hungry ghost or, kind of the lost soul that said, oh, here's a body, I'm going to hook onto her, which is what it was there. That's the fear of it, right?
Right.
Oh my God, so the wrong person has gotten in my car and they're taking off with it. But after some of the masters in these mystical arts reviewed the footage, they said, well, what we think is that it was a higher Buddhist deity that took over your body. And the reason it was so violent and the reason it was so hard is because you were not ready and you haven't been trained. So once you're trained and you understand how to fine tune your antenna, it'll be a much smoother experience.
And they stated that beautifully, which leads to my next question. And we're running out of time, so this might be the last question, maybe not. But the idea, you describe yourself as this very organized, very A-type personality. So I guess, something like that was a lesson to learn, exactly.
You think?
Ever so quickly, I did a Reiki treatment on a woman who claimed was an A-type personality. She goes, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. I was about 1/3 into the treatment and she started bawling, crying, tearing. I mean, violently crying. And she revealed to me later on that she was going through a divorce and she hadn't told anybody. I was like, see, this stuff works. You got to let it out. You got to let it out. But for you, how has this affected your life and your idea of your spiritual journey, your idea of everybody has to have their ducks in a row? How has your life changed with all of this?
It's the last question, so I'll try to be pithy. But I would say the most profound thing, first of all, I thought that everything that was given to me was in the tapes, because I was a filmmaker. And so for many years, I kept them in a safe. I was always very careful, where are the tapes? What's happening with the tapes? It took me a while to understand that what was given to me was in me. And so, then I started having a very healthy healing practice. And to be honest, Bernard, I have no idea how it took off. People just started calling me and saying, I hear you're a healer. And I would say, who do you hear that from? And sometimes they knew and sometimes they didn't. So for a while, I had a very thriving healing practice. And I believe that practice of working with people and putting the teachings to work allowed me to internalize them in such a way that now I can share them with a greater audience. Because before it would have been just me repeating what I heard or saying, look at the movie. But now it's something that I feel I carry within me. So I don't need to show you the movie to be able to express what was taught to me. And then in short, in terms of me personally, what this journey has given me is great courage. I know now that whatever I'm faced with, I have the tools to deal with it with grace. Not always as graceful as I'd like, but they're there. I can always get out of the hole, or if I can't get out of the hole, I'm going to find the greatest peace that I can have within that hole. And I think for me personally, so I was born into war. So to find this peace in this lifetime has been such a gift.
Oh, wow. I bet. Unbelievable. What a wonderful journey for you.
Yes.
Absolutely. And as far as your next journey, what's next for you now?
Well, I would love to be able to do a series because there's so many more traditions that I didn't get to, Bernard, that are still on my list. And again, just the idea of being able to take a picture of that tree before we cut it down, let me get there before you burn down the forest, please. And so I would love to be able to do either a web series or a TV series and get out there and capture more traditions, but also do something within America, within the West, so that people know, well, what if I can't go over there? And what if I can't get to a shaman? Then I want them to understand they can access people like you. They can have, intuitive readings. They can get acupuncture. There are different protocols that are appropriate for different disease states or different challenges we have. So I'd like to also do a series about what can you do here and now to help yourself.
What a great concept. I like that. And we have about 3 more minutes left. If you had let's say you knew that the entire world was listening right now to every word you were saying, what would the one message to humanity be that you would like to share today?
I would say if we could commit to uncovering our authentic selves and to embrace our shadow and to work with our shadow, then we won't have to work it out with each other. So if we can deal with the factions that are warring within ourselves, we wouldn't have to go clobber our neighbor. So self-responsibility balanced with being part of a community. And if we can do that, and if we can preserve the different ways that we see the world, then we'll have the tools we need to get through the darkness together.
Oh, beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. Thank you for that. And Marie Rose, the book is called Talking Story: One Woman's Quest to Preserve Ancient Spiritual and Healing Traditions. Mm-hmm. It is at talkingstorybook.com. Is that correct?
It is talkingstorybook.com.
Very cool. And I'm holding the book in my hand right now. I love the cover. I'm curious that the older gentleman in the top center, is that one of the Nepalese shamans?
Well, his name is Agu Lama, and he was actually in Nepal, but he's Tibetan. So he is one of the people that crossed over the border in the fleeing of Tibet, and then brought the influence of Tibetan Buddhism to the Dhammis. And so it's really beautiful because it kind of brought up kind of the animistic kind of practices toward a more spiritual pursuit.
Oh, very interesting. Wow. Mm-hmm. And you speak about him in the book, I'm guessing.
Yes, I do.
Oh,
yes.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Marie Rose. What a pleasure it's been to speak to you and spend the last 2 hours with you. I really, really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
I did. Thank you so much, Bernard. It's wonderful to engage in talking story with you and your listeners. And, join me also on my Facebook page. That's where we keep updated information and inspiration. So that's just Marie Rose Fanlé, author.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you again next week at this time. Next week, we'll be joined by Gary Evans and Olya Teravina, Healing the Heart and Reconnecting to Source Consciousness. We'll see you then, and we love you very much.